Hey everyone, it's Dylan Taggart here again with another 360 Insights HR Tech Chat. I'm joined today by Meredith Reilly from isolved. Meredith is the Chief Sales Officer. And Meredith, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So today we want to talk a bit about, small businesses. They're often dealing with a ton of different things, often understaffed. When it comes to HR benefits and payroll, it can sometimes be overlooked by the owners, the CEO or the CFO or the controller. But unfortunately, these responsibilities frequently rest on their shoulders. We want to dive into that a little bit today. Before we do that, you mind telling the people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. And all of the things and all the reasons you just said, I'm excited to be here. So I've really background been in HCM for over 16 years, really started in sales, led teams, built partnerships, and ultimately helped scale organizations. And I think what makes me most excited, kind of the HR underdog theme, is really connecting that dots between HR, what we call kind of their essential advisors that we'll talk about today, and strategy. Because I know the pressure on HR leaders face and the power of a well activated, we'll kind of call advisory village, right, to drive real outcomes. So again, super excited to talk about this topic and been seeing it and within it for a long period of time now.
Yeah, I like that idea, the way you put it, HR underdog. It makes a lot of sense because it is kind of an uphill battle for a lot of these companies. So, for someone who's not as familiar maybe with this kind of tier of companies and what they're dealing with, could you frame the situation a little bit for people?
Yeah, and I'll give maybe a little thought-provoking question before we go to landscape a little bit. But if you're within HR or maybe an executive stakeholder that works with HR, an advisor, really I want to play with the thought today of how are you building your village? Because in today's world, HR leadership is not about doing it all. It's basically not even possible, right? It's about knowing who's in your corner and how they can help you lead with impact. So think about HR in 2025. It's not just harder than it was, but it's just fundamentally different. So that role of HR has really evolved kind of over time from, hey, operational support to what it is today is a strategic architect, right? So HR leaders now navigate, this landscape that's shaped by things like technology, shifting workforce expectations and ultimately kind of cultural complexity. So if I look at the top list of things that HR, even though we thought of that as maybe people focused, the top of their list are things like AI integration and digital transformation, right? The employee experience is really strategic priority inside of an organization now. Certainly workforce planning, kind of having a skills based priority for that. Manager burnout and leadership development also sits under the function of HR. DEI, we'll call it kind of reimagined the way that is today. But ultimately, with how quick the world changes, how quick CEOs, executives, organizations make decisions, they're dealt with, the change fatigue and organizational trust. And Dylan, the funny part is if you even go back 10 years, which doesn't even feel too long ago, like I like to look at HR in time periods. It's like, what did they focus on then and what are they doing now and how quickly that's changing? If we go back to 2015 to 2025, then it was like head down execution, focused on compliance, payroll, maybe those kind of basic engagements. And now you're like, actually, HR drives the strategy, the culture, and the transformation. Right, we look back at 2015, that was still the time of, we'll call it the annual performance review. Now, we know it's not that, it's this continuous feedback loop with agile goal setting. Then you go, okay, limited remote work at the time. We know pandemic, at least for the US, big change catalyst there. But today it's like hybrid first, global talent pools, but yay, a lot of complex compliance issues that come up, right? Then it was DEI was certainly, we'll call it more of a compliance checkbox. Today it is a cultural and business imperative. And then technology, then it's great supporting cast for HR, today is technology is core to HR delivery and decision making. And kind of lastly, when we do that, compare managers in HR were default leaders. And today, managers are overwhelmed agents really needing support. So when I talk about the village, I think, I have a 1 year old and a 3 year old. We compare that kind of to parenting, right? It takes a village. It takes a village. Everybody tells you that. But for them, it is serious because their challenges are too complex and cross functional for HR to really carry alone, right? In all sizes of organizations, I'd argue. But now we think about who's in that village, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is advisors like benefit brokers, accounting firms, financial advisors, even tech partners, and the list goes on, right? They're not just vendors. They're these co-architects, or you want to keep playing with the analogy here, kind of co-parents of HR culture. So they're the ones that are going to help HR folks operationalize that trust, embed the resilience and really drive that strategic agility. And I think when I think of the best HR leaders that I know today, it's not someone that knows it all, it's someone that knows how to activate that village. When your advisors are really aligned with your company and your HR purpose, they're going to amplify, right, your credibility, certainly capacity, but the most important part is really the impact, right? You're going to go a lot further by bringing these people and having these people along with you.
Yeah, because I think ultimately there's just way too much for a single person to handle at this point.
Yeah.
Just the amount that's changing, and if you're in the US, it's like you have multiple layers of jurisdictional compliance you have to deal with. And it's also changing fairly rapidly as we're kind of in a bit of a change point or like a period of flux with the way we work, how people are working, and but people still are chasing after that simplicity.
Yep.
So, so for the demand of customers like that, and for demand of customers who are looking for advisory like that, how are they kind of approaching these challenges, and how are they changing to adapt to them?
Yeah, everything's kind of the butterfly effect a little bit, right? That ripple, since the world is changing, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, the way that it is, HR shifts, and then the people they lean on have to shift. So the advisors really, I think, have gone through this period that have changed out of, we'll call it like transactional to helping be transformational. So where maybe they were seen as almost like a service provider before, they're really having to play that strategic partner role, because HR leaders aren't just expecting like subject matter expertise in an area. They're expecting, insight, foresight, kind of that co-creation, co-architect, not just execution. And I think about this in a few, we'll call kind of like categories, right? Because I think we all could say that culture is kind of the new currency, right? So now think about benefits, compensation, compliance. Those are really the culture carriers across HR and across companies. So advisors have to not just understand and not take orders, but they have to reflect the values of the company in every recommendation as well, right? And then you go to like, okay, let's talk about technology now. So tech fluency is the table stakes. Nobody wants their advisor to be behind on tech. Everyone else is moving forward. So I think for me it's really HR is digitizing rapidly, right? So advisors can't just bring tech-abled solutions. Yes, they should, but recommendations all the way from like, if I'm benefits and like an AI-driven benefits modeling, predictive analytics, static spreadsheets, and those legacy systems don't cut it anymore. Now you go, okay, well-being isn't just a phrase, it's a business strategy. So advisors are trying to help their clients tackle the financial, emotional, physical well-being that are core to retention and performance. So they have to think about how to support the whole human and design programs to do that, not just the way we used to think of it as an employee. And then kind of rounding out in the last couple, I know we talk about DEI a lot, but this is a funny one where you talked about nuance, especially within the United States, right? Advisors have to help kind of thread that needle between navigating some polarized environments, right, while staying true to inclusion goals. And this is a funny one because misaligned partners in this area can erode trust very quickly, but aligned ones are going to amplify it. And then lastly, the concept of we'll call it like agility over authority. Where before we wanted our benefit broker to just be the subject matter expert there and tell us what to do, agility is a bigger value because the pace and change of demand, right? We're gonna look for advisors that are nimble, responsive, who can pivot with HR leaders and their strategies. And really that long-term value now comes from adaptability and not just kind of that one-time expertise. Things don't stay static. They're constantly moving and advisors need to stay evergreen and stay quite proactive. So I'd say to the folks that you have on, whether you're listening here from inside an organization serving it or from the outside, the message as it relates to advisors and the relationship between HR here is really clear. HR is not just looking for service, they're really looking for synergy.
So pulling back a tiny bit, you're talking about that reshaping of the landscape and of the value equation here. So for someone who's a little less familiar with this, could you lay out kind of the stage? Who are the main players? How does this really work in the real world? And if you have a example from a client, that would be awesome to kind of
Yeah.
make it touch grass, as the kids say.
Yeah. And I'd be happy to, because I think, especially for most of the listeners, we're probably more familiar with maybe the HR side of it, right? The HR practitioner, the decision maker inside of a business that's tasked with all of the people matters and the strategy. But then advisors, right? That sounds like a little bit of a canned phrase. But if we just go to we'll talk about three kind of industries that I've been talking to a lot lately, where look, there's some parallels, right? But there's some nuance. What they're all really looking to do is reimagine their role to deliver kind of that smarter, data driven impact for their clients. So we think about this in terms of outcomes, right? So, outcome to the actual employee inside of an organization by HR programs, the outcome to the business itself, like what are they going to see? And then the outcome to the advisor as a business making recommendations, offering service. All three of those things should be a net positive, right, in the relationship. But the kind of the three we'll talk about a little bit are, hey, a regional bank, right? Maybe you have a banking partner that you rely on for business banking. You have an accounting firm that you've relied on for tax. You have a benefit broker, certainly you've relied on them for insurances, employee benefit, wellness programs. All of those folks are shifting what they're doing, right? So we'll use the bank as an example. Um, Launching, doing a customer survey, finding out that what's a top area where we're missing for you, and finding out that payroll is one of those. They're a bank, right? But wow, they're looking for payroll recommendations, looking for payroll support. So being able to put those two things together and actually launching payroll as an offering for their clients kind of goes hand in hand because again, those businesses are looking for more than a linear way of thinking. So the outcome to the bank for doing this is deepen client retention, right? Added operational value to their existing bank relationships. Maybe then bring on new customers, right? But it's a big retention and value add effort. There's a great way they can leverage data throughout that for predictive analytics. But then the actual outcome to the business for leveraging that advisor in that capacity, improve cash flow visibility, right? Reduce payroll errors, increased operational efficiency. I'd say that's a pro all the way along, right? Then you move over into the world of accounting. So accounting, building out an advisory practice, quite high touch. They're trying to serve clients, but pairing that with payroll and their consulting group, they have this unified compliance compensation strategy, high touch again, under one roof. Now, they also love data and analytics, and their clients want them to make proactive recommendations all the time. What do you see in my business? I don't want to just come to you. You're the expert, right? What should I be doing? Where's my turnover? Benchmarking, all those things they're looking for. And now they have robust analytics outside of just the accounting landscape to point out those matters for them. So we're seeing their clients with certainly, low hanging fruit in the accounting world, like enhanced audit readiness, but the bigger side is optimize labor costs, right? Align compensation with performance metrics, stronger governance, ROI, right? Again, net positive all the way through. And then last, we'll talk about the benefit broker. We have one where it's, they're trying to offer this concierge level support to their clients, but benefits are only one piece of the equation. Putting that together with human capital management is giving that level of white glove treatment, support, cultural alignment for the HR teams that they support. They get to leverage analytics across it, but their customers are seeing employee satisfaction scores increase, right? Reduce turnover, improve benefits utilization because now you have integrated payroll, benefit, and engagement tools. So, whether you're inside of it or again, a business owner looking for that village, these outcomes show how these advisors aren't just really, I call meeting the moment or responding to the demand, right? They're really reshaping what we would consider to be a value equation. Pair high touch, smart analytics, helping clients unlock the things that matter most, efficiency, compliance, and ultimately kind of that culture building strategic move.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of the times the results may vary. You're dealing with businesses where there's a lot of factors involved, and it may be a little tricky for some of these businesses to accurately quantify how
Yeah.
and when they've hit kind of that sweet spot. And you touched on a few of them there, because you're kind of looking for that intersection of people's needs, business strategy, measurable outcomes, and for someone that's in the thick of it, maybe they've been caught up in kind of the mire of just running this themselves. It's been, they finally found a partner that works for them.
Yeah.
What do you see? What do you think are the first results they start seeing where kind of eases off the pressure from them?
Yeah. And it's funny because you mentioned those three categories. I always think about it like, we call it qualitative or quantitative, but the outcomes or the impact the business actually experience, but then there's also the feeling, right? Like being able to acknowledge and almost like hover above yourself to say like, what would that look like if it was in practice? That can be hard to do sometimes, right? But I think the people need side of it that you talked about is what would good look like? Like what would that feel like inside of an organization? You found the right partners, the right, systems, the right things for you. You're talking about improved employee well-being. Hey, there's career development going on, flexibility here. And we know why that matters is it fuels engagement, retention, and ultimately, trust inside of the organization. Then you go into the business strategy side of it. What does that feel and look like? Revenue growth, innovation, maybe it's customer satisfaction. Well, that's really good for HR as well when we talk about ROI because it's aligning HR with the organizational's fundamental kind of core goals. And then the measurable outcomes piece sometimes is hard, but that's like productivity, turnover rates, net promoter score, cost savings. I think sometimes our HR friends don't do themselves justice to connect back to those deliverables because why it matters for HR is it proves their ROI, right? And guides and supports future investment. So that how you've hit the sweet spot, you can look through it from those two standpoints to go, what does it feel like? The retention, the engagement scores, the productivity increases, maybe it's customer satisfaction, there's strategic agility, growth, like all those things you could be looking at. And then you go, okay, there's hard metrics and strategic indicators that you put together, right? So hard metrics, cost savings, turnover, compliance issues reduced, so on and so on. Revenue per employee, maybe, or per team. The strategic indicators are, again, the alignment with HR and business KPIs. Impact of engagement. How do we often run engagement survey scores? What's the impact of engagement on innovation, customer satisfaction? And then manager effectiveness and that leadership pipeline strength. Like those are the things that we're talking about with qualitative and quantitative here. And if you don't have those things, that's a really big indicator to look back at your group. Who's in that co-parenting situation with you, who's in your village and who can help.
Yeah, and long term, where do these relationships usually end up? You're 4 or 5 years down the road. What does that relationship look like opposed to, the first year?
Yeah, so you find the right partners that are evergreen, you don't have to change partners out again. So a lot of HR folks are tasked with going back to selection, vendor recommendations, technology. There's systems all over the place. There's sellers like, I'm in the sales world that are going to try and tell you to do things. But when you find the right group and find that right village, you're often forming into what 2027 holds and you're building the plan for 28 and you're all working on those things together because again they're aligned. They understand your goals, they understand what you're trying to achieve, the tone, the vision, the culture, and yes, have a subject matter expert area and a subject that can help you. But I feel like a few years out, what that looks like for you as a business is you're not ripping and replacing systems and ripping and replacing partnerships. You found the ones that are aligned and now you can evolve and be evergreen from there. Now you're talking about the outcomes more than you're talking about finding a new partner.
Yeah, because I feel like so many businesses and, small and large, but more often small since they're kind of moving fast and may not have the resources to really evaluate something thoroughly. They either rely on recommendations of someone else. So you really want to trust that person because the alternative is you just keep trying things and you keep spending money or you buy things and you don't really know how to use them and they never really take off.
Yep. Yep.
And long term, it's just financially a bad move, but also adds more stress to you, not just because I got to use this thing, I got to learn how to use this thing. That's another thing on my plate.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And we see a lot with that too, like trying to find the right partners. There's a vetting process in that too. There's relationship, there's trust, there's, maybe the things that they're recommending. But I think about something like so much change has gone on for these advisors too. Like you look at your benefit broker, if they're showing up once a year at open enrollment, that's very different than someone that's being a proactive steward for you and co-architecting your HR strategy in your business, right? Just looking at it. So yeah, there's a lot of demand to keep up for advisors, for HR folks, but I would also evaluate those relationships just to say, hey, notice when they're proactive. Notice when they're coming to you, but have you even gone to them? Like go to them first and see what they do with that because you might not be asking them. So it is both of those sides of the coin where you're going, how often are they being proactive with me? But I'm also giving them a chance to make recommendations. But definitely a one time a year engagement is not what a partnership looks like anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of you got to lean on each other and understand that it's not just a one person team. It's not, you don't have to be going through this head down on alone and there's something honorable to it, but why stress so much, I guess, in
Yeah.
the end,
Yeah. Do you want to be a hero or you want to
Yeah,
involve your village in it? Yeah.
for sure. So like, as we approach the end of the half hour here, what would be your, circling back to the key takeaways for someone to sum it all up? What would those look like?
Yeah, I would look through advisors, right? Look through your partnerships, or if you are an advisor, it doesn't matter which side of the coin you're on. They're moving from transactional to strategic folks for an HR business. So look for that. Payroll is now, in my world, HCM, it's a strategic touch point, right? It adds trust, transparency, talent retention. Data and high touch engagement together are really that gold standard. Like an advisor who pairs something like an analytic with empathy, that's what we're looking for to drive better outcomes. And then alignment on HR goals being really essential, not just kind of that measurable impact that's really important, but it goes beyond what we would call like baseline operational support. And then business outcomes really matter. The outcome to the employee, the outcome to the customer, the outcome to the, so on and so on throughout that we've talked about. So, my final, I guess, like plea to folks or the way we can sum it up is whether you're leading HR or advising it, it really is to ask yourself, are you activating, your full village? Or in our previous example, that hero, are you trying to solve it alone? The future of this strategic HR landscape depends on partnerships that deliver more than service. So it's really that, right? It's that take stock of your ecosystem and reflect on all the things that we talked about to say like, hey, let's go build a synergy with our advisors, challenge our team, share the episode, and see if we can build that synergy that really scales your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in today's day and age, with so much at our fingertips, there's really no excuse to just kind of go tread alone through these things. It's there's a million options at your disposal, and technology is there to help a lot of the
Yep.
time.
Yep. And the advisor part of that is the advisor piece is the human. So you get the benefits of all the research you could do online, but the human to actually have that empathy to sit and understand your goals and to help you make, again, those evergreen kind of proactive recommendations. That's the goal. That's the sweet spot
Yeah, you got to have that trusted partner that you can really lean on and have an opinion you can believe.
for sure. That's why we're all here, right?
For sure. Speaking of which is a nice segue to wrap this all up. Thank you again for joining me. And if anyone wants to reach out to you with any more questions about this topic, what would be the best place to?
Yeah, I'm happy to take anything. Meredith Reilly here at isolved. I'm Riley at isolvedhcm.com. I'm happy to chat if anybody wants to connect on this topic, but it's been a true pleasure and honor to be able to talk with you and with everybody listening.
All right. Thanks so much, Meredith. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This has been another 360 Insights HR Tech Chat.